what if I just figured something out about myself on your show?
I love it.
You're such a good host.
I'm taking this to my therapy this week. Today's guest is a multimedia artist, editor, and singer-songwriter. Please welcome to the Zoom, Nina Helene Hirten. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm so well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having. I was gonna. Oh my God, my brain. I was gonna say thank you for having me, then I was like, wait, that's not right. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, my brain today. Where are you based?
Currently, I live in Los Angeles, California.
Okay, very cool. I just was looking at your beautiful setup, and there's so many instruments. It feels so right for someone in music to have your kind of background.
This, honestly, LA, I've lived in a lot of places in my life, and Los Angeles is the only place I've never wanted to leave.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
The second I stepped off the plane here to try and find a place to live, you could feel the energy just like blast at you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And like in the airport. That was the weird part about it. It's like, and I mean, sure, some of that could probably be attributed to, the excitement of, ooh, we might be able to move here, and new places, and I love traveling and stuff. Um, but yeah, the energy here at that time was really, really buzzing, and it was totally my speed,
Yeah.
and everywhere else I've lived, I feel like I've had to like try and get people to keep up with me. And here I'm running with the pack and it's great. So that's changed a little bit since the lockdown, unfortunately. I can't really say that that energy is still here. It's definitely changed, but hopefully it will regain its former glory sometime soon. I'm hopeful. It was a great place. It still can be a great place.
Yeah, I get it. I was in like Studio City this morning and I just feel so like alive and creative and passionate and like just hungry when I'm in that energy. So I totally understand. Amazing. Well, let's just start from the beginning. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in New York City. I grew up in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And when I went to university, I moved to Toronto, where I got my bachelor's degree. And then from there, I spent 6 months in Germany studying abroad, studying sound engineering mostly, but I also worked on the student radio there, which was pretty fun. So I got to interview a lot of bands coming through as the official English speaker.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, that was a blast. So I learned a lot about editing things for radio and interviewing for radio, and that was really a unique experience, especially in Europe where things are a little bit different. They're the same but different, you know. But but after I graduated in Toronto, I moved to Vancouver, thinking that that was going to be Hollywood North. Everything's filmed in Vancouver, and it has been since the '90s, and it still is today. Actually, it's quite a lot still filmed in Vancouver and Toronto, but but it seemed like Vancouver was the best place to go. My husband was born and raised in Vancouver, so we're just like, let's go over there and see how it goes. Unfortunately, as an editor, it wasn't the best move simply because most of the post for everything that they do, that they film in Vancouver, they move down here because in Los Angeles is where all the network heads and the studio heads are, and that's where the editors kind of need to be so that they can be really easily accessible. And so I learned that pretty quickly. But I made the best of my time there. I learned a lot, kind of freelancing, not just as an editor, but I wore many hats in Vancouver as well. I ran my own business, my own production studio, and made lots of music. But eventually we made the move down to LA. We figured that the timing was right.
Mhm.
And once I had my first kid, and it made sense to come back to California. My dad still lives in San Francisco. So we're a little bit closer to family, and this way I could really pursue the dream of being the Hollywood editor,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, it wasn't necessarily an easy move, but it was a good move. It paid off. So
So
yeah, I've been
born in
very
New York
fortunate.
City. What brought you guys out to San Francisco?
Well, let's see. So both my parents were working musicians. My
Okay.
dad still is a working musician, actually. My mom has has shifted away from singing, but she's still very active in the entertainment industry and in Europe, actually. She lives in Budapest now.
Wow.
Uh, but my parents initially moved from New York because my dad got a job in San Francisco, basically. So we'd moved to the West Coast and we became San Franciscans. And much to my mother's chagrin, I think she was more of a New Yorker and still very much is a New Yorker at heart. But yeah, that was our initial draw to San Francisco. So I moved there when I was 2, which is why I really don't count New York City in my history of life, I guess, besides the fact that I was born there. And but when I moved to Toronto, she did move back to New York, so I managed to visit her during some off times because Toronto's pretty close to New York, and it was easy, especially as a student, because they had a bus that was like $30. It was so cheap for a student to just take a bus down to New York City from Toronto. It was just a straight shot, and it was a long bus ride, but man, for the price, I mean, you really can't argue with it. It's totally worth the day trip.
When thinking back to your childhood, was there a defining moment, either for you just as a person or for you in your career, that you remember clearly?
Yes, I mean, I always wanted to be an animator. I grew up watching Disney movies and a lot of very old cartoons and a lot of Canadian cartoons, actually. Because my dad had an anthology of National Film Board cartoons, and so I used to watch a lot of those. And so animation's always been very close to my heart, and I love drawing, and I'm pretty good at it. And so my initial dream was always to draw and be an animator for Disney and live that kind of romantic life. But when kind of around high school or just before high school, Toy Story came out, and then 2D animation, traditional drawn animation, just kind of dropped. Like everybody dropped it. You never saw it anywhere. And so at that point I was like, well, I guess this is not a viable career for me anymore if nobody's going to be doing this. And I looked into 3D animation, and it's very cool, but it's way more technical than drawing is, I would say. And I mean, drawing's pretty technical, but when you start getting into like math and scripts and programming language, and you have to start thinking in 3 dimensions instead of 2, that was a little bit over my head, I think. So I have lots of respect for 3D animators, but that was not for me. So I was kind of humming and hawing, okay, well, how else can I sort of be involved in film and still be able to draw, especially animation. And there were 2 things that really stuck out to me, 2 experiences, I guess. One was a friend of my stepmom worked at Pixar, which was right across the bay in San Francisco, and they managed to swing it so that I could kind of have a little studio tour.
Wow.
And one of the storyboard artists, he took me around. They were working on Monsters Inc. at the time, and so he showed me his artboard. He showed me his storyboard. It was literally a board on the wall where he would put these big drawings and rearrange them and make sure that they were all kind of making sense in sequence, and they showed me how they would pitch them to the director, and they'd make all the voices and stuff like that, and it was just like such a cool experience. and I realized that, okay, there is still kind of maybe a place for me in animation, maybe as a storyboard artist, because this is obviously a really important part of the whole process. So there was that, and then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to keep doing my own thing because that's just kind of how I roll. But I kept going with it, and in high school, I animated so many of my school projects that I'm surprised I actually graduated. Fortunately, I had some very progressive teachers, but so I was doing lots of animations, and in my last 2 years of high school, we had kind of a media class that was integrated with the English and the history class. And so this was in Marin County, so it's a little bit, they had good funding from the parents, we'll say. So I was very privileged to be able to be a part of this program where they were able to get the technology. They had full copies of Final Cut Pro, and They had like super fancy prosumer cameras that were like just hitting the market at the time. I mean, for non-professionals, and it was mini DV, so it wasn't like these were going to go onto giant screens in in Hollywood, but at least you could make good looking productions out of them. And so we'd be making lots of documentaries that kind of integrated all those subjects together. And of course, me being me, I'd always find ways to integrate animation in there. And that's when I really kind of realized that editing was the place for me. It's like where all the things come together. You get the live action footage, you get the animation, you got the music and the sound, and if you give me all the puzzle pieces, suddenly I made the beautiful puzzle picture, and at that point it didn't even really necessarily matter if it was my idea or not. It was what can we make out of this, and it's just like a giant sandbox, and that was just so fun, and I totally fell in love with editing at that point. And
Wow.
Yeah, and when I went to film school, I was gonna edit. That was gonna be the thing.
What about animation when you were young was so magical?
That's a great question. What really stuck with me? It's hard to say because, I mean, I have kids now, and I'll watch lots of cartoons with them, of course. And I mean, cartoons are really, I think, easy for kids to digest.
Mhm.
So that makes sense for me being kind of obsessed with them as a kid, because I think most kids maybe are. But why did it stick with me? Maybe it's my love of drawing, I want to say, just because I do love drawing, and I mean, I still draw constantly. So I think once I realized that I could make my drawings move and tell stories beyond a piece of paper, because I mean, I make comic books and stuff too, but adding that element of movement to me is really, the craft of it is really beautiful. And there's an understanding of physics and art and movement and rhythm and music in some way. It's kind of a visual music, I think. When you watch a 2D animator make paper drawings move, it's hard to explain. But there's a couple like traditional animators that I'll watch on YouTube, for example, that still do the old school, where they'll have the paper and they flip it up and down and they draw and then they flip and then they do this, like there's a technique to it, and I just have the utmost respect for that. And I wouldn't say I was very good at getting that perfect at it, because I never ended up focusing on it like that, but yeah, the understanding of getting a movement from position A to position B in not only a way that makes logical sense to somebody who's watching it, but in a beautiful way to watch, is really a unique craft, and it's a very unique ability, I want to say. So that really drew me to it.
You grew up with parents in the industry, which I feel like is rare to hear. So were they always supportive of you pursuing an artistic path?
Oh yeah, totally. My parents are both. I mean, my mom comes from a long line of singers. Her mom was also a singer and an actress, and so Grandma was always asking me, "What art are you working on? What are you acting? Have you read Shakespeare lately?" Like, she was always, every single time I talked to her, it was always about art. And it's funny because like today as an adult, I am exactly the same. I am my grandma for sure. I really relate to her now, and I totally see where I get all that from. But
how
yeah,
do you relate to her?
Sorry, say that again.
How do you relate to her?
Oh, her life was just art. It was just art. It was music and theater, and that's all she wanted to do. She sang opera, she did Shakespeare. That was like those were her big things. She did a lot of theater as well, other theater that's not Shakespeare, but but like that was the only thing she ever talked about with me. And every time we'd go down to visit, I mean, she had a video camera, and I thought that was really cool. And so I'd always be trying to make movies, and she was just all in it, you know. And I think, and on my dad's side, his mother was also a singer. She was a Italian pop singer, basically, that toured mostly the Middle East. And that's where she met my grandfather. And my grandfathers could also sing, though they were not professional musicians, but obviously they were okay with the musician lifestyle because they married these these very artistic women. So I have a feeling that in my dad's case, him going into the music field was maybe not super supported, which is maybe a factor into why he supported me so much in my art. And he's also a lover of cartoons, so I feel like that helps, you know. It was his video collection of animated shorts from Canada that I watched all the time, you know, and he'd be getting me older cartoons from the 30s and 40s, you know, by Max Fleischer and the Fleischer brothers, I should say, and Betty Boop, and like they were always trying to expose me to historical animation, we'll say, and not just the super Disney stuff that was coming up at the time too. So my dad is an appreciator of animation. I think that was an easy sell for him, you know, for me to get into animation. And my mom, as a singer and an actress in her own right, is just very much, she's very bohemian, and she wants, you know, she just wanted me to pursue what I loved as well. So I'm very lucky in that sense, to have artistic, supportive parents, and I hope I could be like that to my kids too, because my two oldest ones are definitely artistically inclined, especially my oldest one. So it's like, oh, you want to draw? Yes, draw. Here's how you use this. How do you do that? So yeah,
that's so wonderful. I mean, my parents are like as supportive as they come, but not coming from the industry. No one in my family comes from the entertainment industry, so it's definitely been a learning curve for us all as I've, you know, gone down this path, which has its own pros and cons, but it sounds so wonderful that everyone in your family, you know, they're able to guide you too, I imagine.
Yeah, well, my mom taught singing for many, many years in the house. So I would, most of my time outside of school, if it wasn't kind of sitting in my dad's office waiting for him to be done with work, was listening to my mom teach singing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I picked up a lot, and of course I went with her to her singing classes too, because she also continually took singing classes until she decided she didn't want to sing anymore. But it's always, yeah, I've picked up a lot from that. And I mean, my parents have always, especially in the music realm, because that's kind of their realm, of course, they were able to give me a lot of education that I maybe wouldn't have had quite so easily accessible. Plus there was one point where, I mean, we always had a piano in the house. Ironically, piano was not really my instrument. Guitars are my instrument. But that said, there was never an excuse not to play the piano or make some music, you know? And so if I was bored, it'd be, well, I'm going to draw. Okay, I'm going to move over to the piano and make a song. And then, and at one point when my parents split up, my mom kept the house in San Francisco, and it was a Victorian, and at one point she like had 5 pianos in the house. I don't even understand how we got so many pianos, but I mean, there were 2 in the basement. There were 2 in the living room, and there was 1 in the kitchen. So, which is an odd place to have a piano, but she had a what's it called? She had like a plastic top made for it, and so it became the piano bar, so to speak. It didn't really fit in the kitchen, but she didn't also want to get rid of it, so because it was a baby grand, it was this huge piano in the kitchen.
my
It
God.
took up most of the kitchen. I mean, there you could barely walk around. It was pretty ridiculous in retrospect, but yeah, it was so easy to make music. It's just, oh, there's a piano. Oh, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah. So, what does a day in the life look like for you now? And is editing, because you also do your own independent music.
I do, yeah. Well, as of right now, I'm kind of on hiatus with Grimsburg because we're hoping that season 2 does really well. Season 2 airs, I'm not exactly sure when on Fox, but hopefully soon. It has been announced, so it will hopefully come out soon. Then you'll be able to watch it on Hulu. But if season 2 does well, then maybe we'll get a season 3, which is great. So when I am working on a show, like Grimsburg, for example, my day pretty much goes like I wake up at an ungodly hour, do some stretches, make breakfast for everybody, and actually homeschool my kids. So I homeschool the 2 older ones, and then when they're done, I basically hop off to the office, where I do the show work that I need to do for that day, and then I come home and work on one of my projects mostly. That could be writing a song, or it could be working on a music video, or working on some other kind of indie project that maybe doesn't have a huge budget. I really like working on stuff like that. It just keeps me fresh, you know?
Yeah.
And it keeps me from getting pigeonholed too, because a lot of times I won't work on something that is a major animated show, you know, on the side. It might be like a little documentary short, or it might be a horror movie, or something just completely different, you know? So I really like doing stuff like that. Or I'll draw, of course, do lots of drawing. But right now on hiatus, I'm kind of spending most of my time. I still wake up at an ungodly hour and do my stretches and do the kids' school and stuff. And once that's done, then I basically sit down and start working on one of the many projects that I have on my slate. So I got a lot going on right now, actually, which I still have to work on organizing my time a little bit better to make sure that I get it all done. But it will get all done, and I really feel like a lot of these projects are very exciting. So,
Can you share about any of them?
yeah, well, the one that I'm really excited about that I'm hoping will come out, I'll be able to release hopefully in early next year, maybe February, March, if I can get my poop together, then that would be great. But it's basically I'm doing, I made vocal arrangements of 6 different popular songs.
Wow.
And they're not like super popular songs. They're by people you've heard, and you maybe have heard some of the songs, but they're not necessarily like the hit song, you know? So, for example, I'm doing one Nine Inch Nails song, I'm doing The Fragile. I've got a Halsey song named Control, which is a little bit of a B-side, but...
So funny, I was just driving home and listening to her album Manic from 2020. She's so incredible.
I love Halsey. She's
you listen to
definitely
her
one of my
new
favorite
album?
modern artists.
That came out today.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Yeah, she dropped an album today. I think it's called The Great Impersonator. But
Oh my gosh, well, I'll have to go look at that.
yeah, she's so talented.
Yeah, she's great. So very much after my own heart, this girl. So doing everything, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so those are 2 examples of songs I'm doing. I'm doing an Iron Maiden song, you know. So it's an eclectic mix.
Yeah.
There's a George Michael song in there. Yeah, so it's like it's definitely an eclectic mix of things, and it's all completely vocal, with the exception of there's like 2 songs that I have an egg shaker, but
Wow.
but I'm doing, yeah, I've always wanted to do something like this, and so I have them all recorded. Now I just have to edit them and mix them, and so that will be out soon. That's like the one thing that I think people will be able to like see soon, you know.
Yeah.
I'm also directing a music video for not me, but for a friend's band, and that's a cover of a Weird Al original song, which is also kind of funny because, you know, Weird Al is kind of known for his parody covers, but he does have original songs too.
That is so funny.
So yeah, this band does covers of original songs, and that's so we're going to be doing kind of a very cheesy B-movie style music video for that. And so we're going to record, we'll record that hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be able to get that out before Thanksgiving. That's the goal. So yeah, that's like the two immediate stuff.
Cool. What inspires you for your original music? Like who inspires you?
Oh, musically?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Depeche Mode and Peter Gabriel are are way up there, I would say. Peter Gabriel especially has just been very close to my ethos for a very long time, ever since I was very young, I think. And then uh, Garbage and Nine Inch Nails also are two very influential in my musical journey, I would say. Um, though these days, as far as more modern references, I mean, I really like Halsey. I really like what she's doing. I think Grimes is doing some really cool stuff too, and she does some interesting twists and turns in her music. Um, I don't know if I would necessarily consider my music sounding a lot like any of those people, but I mean, probably closer to my older references, you know, as far as like what I sound like. But yeah, musically speaking, that's kind of where I draw most of my inspiration from. But I mean, I listen to a lot of music. I love metal. I love electronic. I love pop. I literally listen to everything. There's something on my iPad. There's something on my iPod for everybody, for sure. So I really don't like to limit myself. So yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer in that respect. But
For sure.
yeah, that's kind of where I pull a lot of my my feelings from as far as like sounds go, I guess.
Yeah. What would you say has been the most challenging part of your career?
Marketing, trying to get out there, you know. I mean, I feel like that's probably every artist's biggest issue, you know. Especially these days. When I was younger, it wasn't so much of a thing. That the technology was the challenge, you know. But today the technology is so simple that there's everybody can do it. So I mean, my daughter makes songs on her iPad, and it's like instant, easy, and you know, if she's talking about things like, you know, she wants to be Taylor Swift when she grows up, it's like, well, you know, that's not an easy route. That's not an easy thing to do. So, yeah, trying to be realistic about the real thing that is competition out there. You're competing for everybody's ears, right? And it has nothing to do with how good the music is, and it has nothing to do with how bad the music is even. I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do with quality or quantity for that matter. It's how well can you leverage your contacts and your network, you know? And I don't really feel like I've ever been good at that. But yeah, marketing is that's an enigma to me. It really is. I feel like I've read all the books and watched all the YouTube videos and talked to all the people that do it, and it's still just very elusive. Because there comes a point where it's like, you know, you don't really want to barrage your friends with your art, you know. Oh, look at this thing I did. Oh, look at this thing I did. Oh, look at this thing. It's like, it's not, I mean, it is about me, obviously, but it's not really about me. Like, it's about my interaction with you, you know? Like, that's really what I want my art to be about, as I want my art to be a conversation. But there's only so much that you can do that with your friends, and there's only so much that they're able to handle, because they're also getting this from probably most of their other friends, especially if they're also artists, you know? So I feel like a lot of that conversation is really difficult in today's age. And in my opinion, a lot of that has to do with social media. And there's a lot less in-person conversations happening. And that's why it feels so one-sided, you know? It's instead of a group effort. I mean, last week, for example, I went to an art show, like an actual art show at a small gallery, and I met so many interesting people, and it was very small, you know, it was like maybe 30 people there, but still, it's like, even that, you could sit there and you can discuss the art, you know, and and you could be like, oh, well, I really like how this happened. Oh yeah, well, I don't like how that went. Oh, okay, well, blah, blah. And then the conversation is happening. Well, how does this make you feel? You know, and this is really what art is about, to me anyway. So similarly, like a movie theater, you know, you go to see a movie in a movie theater. It's a collective experience. You're there with everybody else. You're feeling their energy. I'll never forget the time that so my dad had never seen The Exorcist when it came out, and there was a theatrical release of like re-release when I was a kid at some point, and I was like, oh, I want to go see The Exorcist in the theater. That'd be amazing, because I liked horror a lot when I was a kid, and I didn't think that I would get the chance to see a lot of those movies that came out before I was born or before I was like able to go watch them in a movie theater. And so so I dragged my dad with me, and he had never seen it before, and I'll never forget going to that movie, because it was jam-packed. It was totally full. It was like, you know, a late afternoon matinee, but it was totally packed, and there was a group of people that were just like yelling at the screen, oh my god, no, she did it. Oh my. It was just like, you know, it was so fun. Yeah. and I used to do that a lot when I was a kid. I would always go to like midnight screenings, and one of my favorite things to do in high school was during the summertime, there was a midnight screening at this little small theater in San Francisco where they had drag queen roller derby, and it was just like a bunch of drag queens roller derbying around the theater while this cult movie would be playing. So, you know, they'd play like Mommy Dearest or lots of, you know, popular movies in kind of the gay community, I guess. Or like Freaks, or just totally weird B movies that you would probably never find today or stumble upon today unless you were really actively looking for these things. It's just very obscure things. Anyway, so, but like that was the same kind of deal. And all these people were regulars, and they all knew all the lines, and they would all just like yell at the screen. And it was just this giant collective experience, and it was so fun, you know. And that's just doesn't exist anymore. And I kind of feel sad for my kids that I don't know if they're ever going to be able to experience something totally off the wall like that and like feel that kind of energy in the same way, you know? It's theaters are dying. Nobody's going to movie theaters anymore. So everybody's kind of opting to stay home in their caves by themselves. And that makes me really sad. But
I'm hoping when Wicked comes out, people will go to the theater, because I'll certainly be in the theater more than once.
I know, I can imagine the following with that one, and I would totally love to see that in a theater. And I mean, I haven't even seen the musical, but I already know, like I've heard lots of the music, but and I know the premise, but I can imagine that like if I went to a theater full of Wicked fans, that would be great. I would love that. Especially as somebody who hasn't seen it, because that's the experience I want. Like I want to feel people feel the art, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So as an editor, do you ever get to experience that firsthand?
So a big part of my job as an editor is to be able to read the room. So if I have a room full of studio executives and the director, for example, and I did a bunch of work the previous week, and we're sitting down to review my work, basically, I have to be able to sit there and kind of understand, is this working? Are they laughing at the points where they're supposed to laugh? Are they crying at the parts they're supposed to cry? You know, I have to evaluate whether the edit is working, because if it's not, then obviously I gotta change it. And of course, I also want to make sure that I am that I'm staying true to whatever vision they had when they wrote it, or when they directed it, right? So it's kind of a precarious balance that I try to handle as an editor. And when they're in the room with me, it's much faster and easier for me to understand what they want to get out of the scene or the movie versus if when they're not there, because then it's very much I'm in a vacuum at that point. And who am I making the movie for? Again, I'm not making the movie for me. I'm making the movie for, them as well, but ultimately the end viewer. So there's only so much I can put myself into the end viewer's position. I like to think I'm a pretty empathetic person. I can sit and pretend to be that person in order to say, how do I feel about this after watching it? And try to erase what I might actually think, especially if the movie is not for somebody like me, but for somebody of a completely different demographic, we'll say. I kind of have to really be able to put myself in that person's shoes. But there's only so far I can do that. There needs to come a point where in order for me to truly be objective, I have to be around those people and observe how they react to it, you know? So in the editing room, yeah, that's really where I get a lot of that feedback, that kind of energetic feedback, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's test screenings and stuff that bigger productions might do. And those are also really useful. And I always try to go to those because I also, again, I want to see how are people reacting to these things.
Yeah. That must be so cool to kind of hear people's reactions.
Oh, I love it. It's so fun. I mean, sometimes it's nerve-wracking because it's like, oh my God, are they going to actually laugh here? You know, I'm sure that it's probably even more anxiety-inducing for, you know, the writer or the creator of whatever project I edited. But
Really.
but again, it's like, as the editor, it's my responsibility to make sure that that vision is presented in the way that wasn't originally wanted, you know? So so that's kind of a lot of pressure. But again, a lot of these things have changed over the last couple of years. So there's a lot less of that. I mean, I haven't had an in-person edit in a long time, like a real in-person edit with a full house, since before the pandemic. So it's a little harder. It's a little harder to gauge how people are feeling over the Zoom, especially when their cameras are off or they're working on something else, you know. So it's not the same world. I have to adjust a little bit, but I mean, I have lots of opinions on that and how that's affected the quality of things. But it is what it is, you know. That's just kind of how movies are being made right now.
Yep. What advice would you give to an aspiring artist?
Embrace the hustle, because there's going to be a lot of it, a lot of hustle, especially if you want to do the art. There is so much, as I said earlier, there's so much noise out there. There's so many people trying to do the exact same thing. And it's not about gimmicks. It's really about hustle, you know? And if you can stay passionate and not get too jaded, because it will get frustrating. Stay passionate and keep doing your art, and just keep doing your art and keep doing your art. And make sure you can keep the lights on, you know, by having another job if you need to. Then that's the hustle. That's the artist life. That's how it's going to be. And be realistic about it. You know, it's fun to be romantic, you know, but I mean, the chances of you being, again, getting the Justin Bieber break is very, very slim. So if you really want to be a working musician or a working artist or actress or filmmaker or anything like that, it is really truly about the hustle, and you cannot be afraid of working it. And I get a lot of flack for this, but I think working for free isn't a bad thing. I think you should be willing to work for free or for low pay. I mean, you should recognize when you're getting taken advantage of, but also you can't be afraid of free work. Like, don't be the entitled person, because the kids on YouTube, they don't care. That's who you're competing with. So you're competing with true passion. So if you're serious, you got to be equally as passionate and do what you got to do to get out there and make your art.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this has been so wonderful. I always end with this question. I know it's kind of a heavy one, but I'm always interested to hear, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh man. I think about this often.
You do?
I really do. I think about it often.
Why?
Especially after having kids, you really start thinking about what really is my place in this world. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I was like, oh, I'm going to be an animator for Disney, and I'm also going to be this rock star. Like, you know, I envisioned myself as Taylor Swift, but and that sometimes that's just not the way that life goes, you know. But I think ultimately I want my legacy to be what my grandma's legacy was for me, which was, if you love the art, then make the art and do the art, you know? And to me, art really is my life, you know? And I don't think that I could do anything else. and I got to find a way to make it all work, you know, and to be able to still sustain my family. And I mean, she really embodied that, you know. It's just I make the art, and she always was trying to inspire me to make the art. And I think if I can inspire people to also make the art and make make art a conversation again, then I think that would be a good legacy for me. I think that's a good place for me to aim for. Yeah. Maybe that'll be my, yeah, make art a conversation again. That's the longest.
I love it. I love it. That's incredibly inspiring.
Oh, thanks. It's a thankless job.
But it's a meaningful one and it's an empowerment.
Yes, yes. No, art is so important. It's so important for society, you know, and for life. And even if it's not, you know, a job like a trade might be, for example, for a lot of people, it's still so important. And even for somebody who's not an artist, if you're a plumber who likes to draw, you should draw, man. Like, do your art. The art is where the life is, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And doesn't have to be a full-time or an income to
Yeah.
express yourself.
Yeah, don't feel like it has to be an income. If it is just a hobby and you're making stuff for your friends, awesome. You know, I mean, most of my art is like presents for friends, really. I want to say these days, like my drawings anyway. So I get hired to do them once in a while, but for the most part, that's like, you know, oh, I was thinking about you and I drew this thing that reminds me of you, and here you go. Yeah. And it's, to me, that's a more meaningful gift than a gift card. So
I'll like, if it's like my parents' birthday, I'll like write them a song, and it's, you know, such a meaningful gift. And
that's great.
I love that. That's something that, you know, I'm able to give them as a gift. It's really special.
Yeah, and it's tailor-made, you know, and it's so unique. And I mean, I love it when people give me art. That's like, I would rather have people give me drawings or sculptures that they made or whatever or write me a song than sending me something else to fill in this house, you know, like I have too much stuff already. Yeah, show me a piece of your soul. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, yes. Nina, you're amazing. Thank you again for your time and for sharing your wisdom. This was really lovely, and I'm so glad we got to meet.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.